Well, this is a time in history where it's not enough to know. This is a time in history to know how.
Yeah.
And so when people start scratching their head and saying, you mean my genes don't create disease, and you can say to them less than 1% of the people on the planet are born with a genetic condition. The other 99 to 95% are lifestyle, behaviors, choices.
But why are we always told that?
Well, if you want to have people become reliant on something outside of them to take away what's going on inside of them, you'll advertise, you'll market.
Yeah.
People will say, I need this drug, I need something outside of me to change my internal states. That's profits, that's money. So it's a crazy thing when people start, evidence is the loudest voice. We have studies to show that you can change your gene expression in 4 days. Genes that suppress cancer growth and tumors. Genes to grow new neurons in the brain, not just new connections, but new neurons.
Yeah.
Genes for oxidative balance.
And that's at almost any age?
At any age. We randomly selected just, a group of people, and we had them think differently, make different choices, do different things, create new experiences, and feel new emotions. 4 days. They regulated 8 genes in common that literally would change their health.
So then finish kind of what you were saying about, like, explain to me, so we all know the narrative, it's just embedded in us, of you're born with genetics that are going to cause disease and blah, 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 and these things just happen and it's out of your control. Explain to me how it really works in the sense of a little bit of, I don't know if I'm asking you to do too much in one thing, but like epigenetics, and you talk about junk DNA and how that whole system really works.
Sure. Okay, well, your body is a protein-producing machine.
Okay.
And every cell in your body makes proteins except for red blood cells. And in order for a cell to make a protein, a gene has to be regulated.
Yeah.
So then genes are like Christmas tree lights.
Yeah.
They're switching on and off all the time. And when they switch on, they upregulate and they make a healthy protein.
Yeah.
When they switch off, they downregulate and they make a cheaper protein.
Yeah.
So then, if you're thinking the same way, making the same choices, doing the exact same things in routine and the same habits, doing the same things that create the same experiences, that create the same feelings, you got the same genes turned on and the other genes turned off.
Yeah.
Same Christmas tree lights on, the other one's off. Now you're headed for a genetic destiny.
Which also ties into the fact that we see the world the way we want to see it. Like, we have kind of our beliefs and we validate that with everything around us, not vice versa.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah, we don't see things how they are, we see things how we are.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to...
Yeah,
okay. So now we're just running that loop all day, every day.
And if you don't know that you have control over your genes, then it never crosses your mind, right?
Yeah.
So then the other part of that is when a person's living by the same feeling and the same emotion every single day, and those emotions are influencing the way they think and the way they act, and they can't think greater than how they feel, or they can't act greater than how they feel, and feelings and emotions are a record of the past, they're in a program of the past, right? So the body, again, now is believing it's in the same past experience 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and now you're down-regulating a gene. So then if you have a propensity for Alzheimer's, if you have propensity for heart disease, if your family has a propensity for cancer, or ulcerative colitis or MS or whatever, then of course it makes sense then that if you're living in the reactions of fear and anger and hostility and envy and jealousy and resentment and pain and suffering, it's those very emotions that select and instruct genes. So then think about this. 2 identical twins, both born with the same exact genome. There's no variations. They have the same exact genes.
Yeah.
One dies at 52, the other one dies at 88.
Yeah.
Oh, there's got to be some environmental influence, right?
Yeah.
So then they used to say genes create disease. 1% of the population has a genetic condition like Tay-Sachs disease or sickle cell anemia or type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
The other 99%, 95% is lifestyle. So then they say, well, it's not genes that create disease, it's the environment that signals the gene that creates disease. Okay, but how can 2 factory workers working side by side, both exposed to the same carcinogenic chemical, one gets cancer and the other doesn't? Well, the environment around the cell is still the inner environment of your body. So then a person who's living, reacting to the same people in the same way, same circumstances in the same way, they keep knocking on the same genetic door.
Yeah.
And so sooner or later, once that gene is signaled, now all of a sudden the cell is programmed to begin to make a cheaper protein. So the question is, Can you reverse that process? Well, if it took you 5 years to create the health condition, you may have to work a little bit to reverse it.
Yeah.
But yet, we're getting so good at measuring and being able to teach people how to do this that it's not uncommon that we see people have a complete remission of a health condition in 1 week in a week-long workshop that we have. Because they understand then they're going to be the governor or the ruler of their own thoughts and feelings, and they'll go through a period where they feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, that's because you're in the midst of change. But they're willing to do it as long as they understand that if they keep changing the way they think, act, and feel, there should be biological changes that take place in the body, and that's exactly what we see.
Gosh. And so thoughts and feelings are kind of the core of all this?
Yeah.
It's being able to manage and get those straight.
Okay, well, think about this.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, most people, your brain is a record of the past.
Yep.
It's an artifact of everything you've learned and experienced at this moment. It's the memory bank of everything you know. It's the known self.
Yep.
People wake up in the morning, they start thinking about their problems. 90% of the people do this. Those problems are memories that are etched in their brain.
Yeah.
They're connected to certain people and certain objects and things at certain times and places.
Yeah.
If they believe their thoughts have something to do with their future, the moment they're remembering their past, they're thinking in the past.
Yeah.
Every one of those problems has an emotion associated with them.
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden they start feeling unhappy. Well, thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain. Feelings are the vocabulary of your body. How you think and how you feel creates a state of being. So most people start their day with their entire state of being in the familiar past. Now, when they're familiar past, they're going to crave the predictable future because they want to stay in the known.
Yeah.
The unknown, that's just, they'd rather hang on to their suffering and their pain than take a chance and possibility. In fact, they don't even know they're suffering. They just think it's how they normally feel until they decide to begin to change. So when we're studying spontaneous remissions, people kind of stumbled on this by trusting something innate in them, something intuitive in them. Not so mechanical, but just like, God, if I had another shot at life, how would I think? How would I act? How would I feel? Who would I become? Who will I be? And they began to change by thought alone. The last thing they had in common, which was really incredible, is that when they closed their eyes and began to image who they wanted to be when they opened their eyes, they lost track of time and space. When they opened their eyes, they thought it was 20 minutes later, and it was an hour later. Because the frontal lobe, that's the creative center of the brain, began to lower the volume to the circuits in the brain where you process space and time. Now your inner world becomes more real than your outer world. And now all of a sudden you're laying strong footprints biologically in the brain and body. So when I saw what these commonalities were, the next thing I said was, well, hell, if it worked on sick people, could it work on well people? Can we help people to change that way? And if it worked on sick people, it should work again on sick people. So that kind of started the whole process. And then when it started working, then we started doing all these measurements to kind of demystify the process. Because nobody's excluded from this. Nobody is excluded.
It's also real quick when you talk about living in the past, one thing that I think you made very clear is the way that, we've all seen or met or know very closely, or maybe ourselves, people that have had traumatic experiences. And you see people living with the weight of that. And I think the one thing that's always blown my mind is if somebody had a traumatic injury to their knee and they walked with a limp for the rest of their life, we wouldn't think that's weird. But if you had a traumatic experience and you live in that for the rest of your life, well, that's now out of our control. That's some whole other stuff. And I think that the way you really clarified it in one of the books about how you can see that when this moment happens, it is embedded in a person and they are constantly now stuck and living in this traumatic experience.
Sure. Well, think about it. Trauma is the stronger the emotional reaction you have to whatever's causing it. The more altered you feel inside of you, the more you pay attention to what's causing it. And the brain holds the image and freezes it and takes a picture. And now you emboss that neurologically in the brain. Now, people will think neurologically within those circuits and feel chemically within the boundaries of those emotions. And so then you'll ask them, why are you this way? And they'll say, I'm this way because of this event, which means I haven't been able to change since that event, even though it's 20 years ago. And so every time they tell the story of that event, they're refiring and rewiring and producing more of the emotions to reaffirm the fact that they are who they are, excusing themselves from changing. Now, here's the crazy part. The latest research on memory says that 50% of what we talk about in our past isn't even the truth.
Yeah.
So people are reliving a miserable life they never even had.
Yep.
They embellish it just so they could reaffirm the emotions that they feel, so that it keeps them as the same person.
Yeah.